Well, good morning, everyone. It's so nice to see you all here this morning. It's been a bit of a journey. We had a little bump in the road called the pandemic, and so we had to reschedule. And despite the current reminder that we still are in winter in Erie, we are very happy to be here today. I'm Laurie Root. I'm the president of United Way of Erie County. And today you'll hear from two leaders in our community who are literally changing, or perhaps a better way to state that is restoring, the landscape of what was once commonly known as Millionaire's Row in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Now part of the West 6th Street Historic District, which was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1984, this section of 6th Street is being thoughtfully, carefully, meticulously, and I would add lovingly, restored to its original architectural beauty and integrity. These mansions and residential buildings were designed by leading architects of the area and reflect the tastes and lifestyles of America's 19th century high society. So let me introduce today's speakers. Jeff Kidder founded Kidder Architects in 2003 and has more than 30 years experience with an emphasis on historic preservation and adaptive reuse. Jeff is a member of the American Institute of Architects and holds a certificate with the National Council of Architectural Registration Boards. He has been active in numerous local initiatives, including historical and preservation efforts. He holds a BS in Architecture from Arizona State University and a Master's of Architecture and Certificate of Preservation from UVA. Jeff will share his perspective on restoring these historical buildings in a digital age, including challenges and discoveries. Our second speaker is Tom Hagen, who is chairman of Custom Group Industries and Erie Insurance. He has a career spanning 40 years at Erie Insurance, rising from a part-time clerk while attending Penn State Behrend to chairman and CEO, and that is a professional journey that we would all love to have. Following his career at Erie Insurance, Tom served as the 28th and last Pennsylvania Secretary of Commerce and the first Secretary of Community and Economic Development. As if that's not enough, he is also a retired U.S. Navy Reserve captain. Tom has held leadership positions in many state and local organizations and is the recipient of numerous awards, including United Way's Alexis de Tocqueville Award. Tom attended Penn State Behrend and received his BS in Business from Ohio State University, and in 1987 received its Alumni Citizenship Award. In 1996, Edinburgh University awarded him an honorary Doctor of Public Service degree. Tom will share the historical significance of this project in the development of our city and his vision for it. And maybe, if we're lucky, we'll learn more about the plans for the former United Way building that some of us are particularly interested in learning. So with that, I'll invite Jeff to come up.
Thank you very much, Laurie. So we have a lot to look at in a kind of a short window here, so it's going to be a little fast-paced, but we want to make sure you get a good overview of what's been going on over the last several years. So I think we'll just get started here. And we're going to tag team a little because I'm going to talk about the buildings and the construction side, and Tom can talk about history and his interest in this in general. But the Historic Erie Preservation Trust is kind of the mother organization of all these efforts lately that's going on. And the purpose of the Preservation Trust is acquisition, restoration, preservation, maintenance, and operation of historically important or architecturally significant houses, building, or other structures located in Erie County, 19th and 20th century. So that's a general broad mission of that organization. And these are some of the properties we're going to be talking about. All are on West 6th Street except upper left one, and these are all represent what they look like when they were purchased. And you can see a whole wide range from the upper left being in the 1830s down to the bottom right, which is about 1927. So we have about a 100-year span of buildings, all different styles, kind of a textbook of American residential architecture, and a lot in between. I want to take a step back, though, for the greater context of the neighborhood and efforts in the Millionaire's Row. The Watson Curtsy Mansion, which is on the campus where we are here now, this is a photo of it from 2014, so just about 8 years ago. This is what the mansion looked like. The Erie County Historical Society controlled it. They operated out of 3 sites. They were on State Street, had this campus, and they have a property in Girard Battles Farm. And Cal Pfeiffer, who was director at the time, and his board kind of had to make a big decision. Can they maintain 3 historic properties? And they couldn't. So they made a decision to make the Watson Curtsy Mansion campus the headquarters and shift away from State Street. And this is what they had started with at the time. It was tired. It's our significant kind of public building in the district. And this is the west side of it, but it was dirty. Roof was 60 years old. And anyways, to become their home base, they really had to make a significant investment. And thanks to Tom and other donors, they were able to do that. So just some quick photos underway, cleaning. It needed a good bath. It needed a roof. And then, this is what it looks like today. So 2004, 14, 15, 16, this work was going on. And that was the first phase. The carriage house next door the planetarium was removed. It was turned into the visitor center and archives library. And then an archive building was built, 10,000 square foot archive building, so that everything could shift from State Street. So that was phase 1, and it was renamed Hagan History Center. And that was the beginning of kind of the major transformation. There's other people in the neighborhood doing their single buildings, and they all deserve equal credit, but nothing had happened at this scale. The next phase on the History Center campus was, while that was done, right next door was the Morrison house, and this is what it looked like at the time. And the Historical Society had been trying to buy this property for a long time. And finally, again, thanks to Tom, they were able to purchase it and renovate it to what it looks like today, and that was completed about 2018. And its exhibit spaces, there's some before and some after. And then getting control of this property and the land on this property then let us build the building we're in right now, which we call the exhibit building. And the whole reason this exhibit building really came about was to create gallery space, which you walk through downstairs, and to then become the home of a relocated Frank Lloyd Wright, Aaron Green, San Francisco architect's office that Tom was able to acquire from a friend in Buffalo. And I could give a whole nother talk on that. So I could give a whole talk on everything we're talking about, but I have to skim through this. But the opportunity to acquire this interior, which is right below us over here, we needed someplace to put it, so this building came about. And these are just some photos of it downstairs in its reconstructed form. And if you haven't seen it, please, before you leave, go down and walk through it. But this was an effort to take the History Center to a bigger context than just a local historical society, and bring in something that would bring in national and international visitors to Erie and the History Center, being as Frank Lloyd Wright. And really, it was to be between Buffalo, where he has buildings, and Falling Water and other buildings down by Pittsburgh. And if you're going between the two, you have to come through Erie. So we make a little reason to have a detour. So that ends up with the campus as we know it today. And the last building on the far right was the barn for the Morrison house that we renovated also. So that kind of was going on over the last 8 years. And one day I was standing down where that star is at the bottom during renovations of the Morrison house, looking, just checking on things in that building. And next door were what we call now Canal side Townhouses, literally right next door. And this is pretty much what they look like. I'm going to go back, but so all millions and millions of dollars and efforts and these beautiful campus of buildings, And then next door were kind of tired, run down apartment buildings. And when I was standing in the front yard, literally standing there, I took that and looking over at that building. I mean, it's 30, 40 feet away, and it's a very prominent building, and it just looked like a tired. But then I was also watching, and the owner has other properties, and he was doing what he had to do to make it work, but they were up knocking off all the detail off the building. I mean, they were up there with hammers and just knocking off brackets and detail and covering up everything. And something just didn't feel right. And you can see here's a view before they did work, but you can see all the detail up here. And it was tired, but a lot of it was still there, slate roof and that detail. And then this was it after they kind of covered up everything and very simplified it. And again, something just didn't feel right. So Tom and I were talking about like what can be done, if anything. And Tom had lived in Newport and was familiar with Newport, Rhode Island, and I was familiar with this organization there. That's the Newport Restoration Foundation, and it's an entity that was founded in the 60s and kind of developed over the 70s and 80s, and was had a patron, Doris Duke, who was interested in preserving Newport's more common architecture, 18th, 19th century buildings, because Newport has their mansions, and everybody, the mansions, just like Watson Curtsy, are what gets a lot of attention, but the lesser, more common buildings don't. So this effort of the Newport Restoration Foundation was to acquire these lesser properties and renovate them, and they have 80 buildings. 2 are museums, the rest are just mostly single-family homes that they rent out. And so as Tom and I talked, this model seemed to be interesting, so we went and met them and saw their properties and talked to them and kind of learned how they work, what makes them tick. And this is off their website, but these are just some of their buildings that they own and maintain, and thought maybe this was a model that could work here, maybe on a smaller scale. So in late 2018, which was just a little over 3 years ago, Tom created Historic Erie Preservation Trust as the kind of the long-term keeper, caretaker, steward of properties. As they get acquired, they eventually will go into the trust and be protected in perpetuity. And then another entity called Historic Erie Restorations, which is more of a kind of the working side. And also, some of these buildings we've been doing are getting historic preservation tax credits, so they have to be income generating for-profit entities for a 5-year period. So those fall under the HER family, and then after the credits and stuff expire, they will get shifted over. So in late 2018, this idea of this entity acquiring properties, but the focus being West 6th Street, because the investments are already here, the inventory of buildings are here, some stuff was available. So this is just an old photo of Erie, and Perry Square in the middle, Gridley Park on the left. We all know State Street and 6th Street, so these are kind of the major crossroads. And then what's interesting as side stories is the Erie Canal ran literally right through Canal side over here and went down to the bay, and that's the blue line there. But and then we're here right now where that star is, right in the middle of the historic district, and then that yellow shape represents the boundary of the National Register Historic District. So it's like 170 buildings in the district. So today, as we stand here, all these stars represent properties that are controlled by either HER or HEPT, and you can see all but one of them are within the district. So I'm just going to jump right into some of these, starting with the one that's out, what we call Troy Sterrett, which is 414, 416 State Street, which used to be an American Surplus store. And this is what it looked like when we got it. It's basically two buildings. Sterrett House is on the right, 1830s, and the Troy Laundry Building is on the left. And I'm going to kind of run through this fairly quick, but that's what it looked like when we got it. We have one old photo of it, about 1890, when the building on the left was built, and that's all we had. I guess some of the surprises, both good and bad, a lot of these buildings that we have, there's a lot of historic photos of Erie architecture, except for most of the buildings we are working on, which is a little frustrating, but luckily we had this one photo, even though the house, the Sterrett house, it's already been kind of remodeled a little bit there with the windows and stuff, but use that. This is what it looked like in maybe the 50s. The laundry business had expanded and taken over both buildings. It was industrial laundry. This is what it looked like in the early 90s. It didn't really show well. So John Vanko actually bought this and owned it for a while, and he just wanted to save the buildings. So he knew eventually that he couldn't do what needed to be done to it, but he protected it and saved it because somebody would have maybe bought it and tore it down. So, and then again, this is how we got it. And then just, figuring out what to do with it. One thing you'll notice here is this whole upper facade up here is kind of missing here. And if you look at the old photo, it was missing stuff. So that's what it looks like today. We just completed it last year, and it's 5 apartments and a storefront. So we pretty much tried to make it like it was. And some of the challenge, this building was challenged, just condition challenge. It was really beat up. So that's the back. And there were other additions that John had torn off, and I'm going to have to run through these quickly because we could be here all day. But that's what it looked like in the back, and that's what it looks like now. So again, a lot of work, and there's a whole big phase between these two photos that's interesting, but we don't have time for that. This was the back of the Sterrett house there, that peak, and that's what it looked like. Our intent was to save as much of it as we could, and we tried. And then another surprise, you go into some of these thinking things, and then the more you dig, you realize these are worse than we thought. So we tore it down, the back wing, and rebuilt it on the same foundation, and that's what it looks like now, with a courtyard in the back for tenants and parking and everything. So this is kind of our typical full-blown project where it touches everything. Site work, utilities, entire exterior, entire interior, systems, finishes, all kinds of stuff. So you can kind of see what's going on here. This was the inside. This was the second floor of the house at the time. That's what it looks like now. It's a living room of an apartment. This was the back of the second floor, and that's what kind of our standards are for kitchens. And we recreated an original stair in the house that was missing for common access. And then in the Troy, this was never housing, the Troy building, because it was in a laundry building, so it was more like a loft. So this was the condition of the back, and now they're apartments, kind of more simple, modern. So like I said, there's 5 apartments there. So that was a big project, and that was fun. And I think, we're all very happy with the results, and it leased up immediately, and it's going well. So now we're moving into the West 6th Street Historic District, and this is what's the old Norman house, and maybe you've gone there when Ron Norman had his photography studio, get your portrait photo taken. And Tom, I don't know, do you want to say anything about?
Why don't I interrupt
Yeah.
just for a second? First of all, going back to the Troy Sterrett properties, the Troy Steam Laundry was founded in that building. The Troy part of those two buildings was built in 1889, but it was a woman-owned laundry business. Annie Shanahan, who came from Ireland with her mother, and her mother had set up a hand washing business in her residence on East 4th Street. And Annie was a maid at a mansion on West 10th Street. And she got this franchise from the Troy laundry machinery business in Troy, New York, that made laundry equipment and a new way of doing laundry. And she started at 3rd and State, and then bought this, or built this building. About the same time, she married a guy by the name of Heffernan, also an Irish immigrant, who was the sergeant of Marines on the USS Michigan, and he retired from that. And ostensibly, his name was connected with hers in owning the property, but she ran the whole business up until about World War I. So I think that's kind of an interesting story. With the Olds house here, it was Clark Olds, who was a very prominent lawyer in Erie, who built the house. His son, Irving S. Olds, went on to go to Yale, graduated with honors from Harvard Law School, became a member of the Erie County Bar, but then clerked for Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes. He then went to a white shoe law firm in New York, White and Case. He became a partner in 1917 and was a partner the rest of his life. But in the meantime, in the late 30s, early 40s, he was on the board of United States Steel, U.S. Steel, and he became chairman and CEO, and he was chairman and CEO during World War II, when, of course, U.S. Steel was at its prime. He had a Great Lakes freighter named after him, the Irving S. Olds. And some of you knew Irving Murphy, the lawyer in Erie. Irving Olds Murphy, he was a cousin. His mother was a cousin to the Irving Olds that grew up in this house, went to Erie High School. So there's some really neat people connected with some of these properties, and we'll talk a little more about that as we go along. Okay.
So the Olds house, it's kind of waiting. It's in waiting. We have it. We control it. It's just waiting. So this is just, we haven't done anything. But there is the other thing you'll see a lot of the buildings have garages or carriage houses to them too that are part of the whole development. So this is we call it the barn behind. That we intend to preserve too. But these are just some general current interior. And, Ron was there. He actually took pretty good care of the inside. Outside doesn't look well kept, but the inside he actually did keep it. But this is kind of where we're going to be starting once we figure out what we're going to do with it. Just some general photos. But this is probably the most ornate Victorian-ish one that we have, and in pretty much unmodified condition. It's never been cut up in anything, but just a lot of little detail that's still there. So moving west, we have the Alex Jarecki house, 305. It was Shapiro Law for a long time. And when we acquired it, so this is as it was when we got it. Completed 1911. Architect was Frank Mead out of Cleveland. Frank Mead actually did quite a few houses here on West 6th Street. For the Jarecki family, there's 5 or 6 Jarecki homes. And Mead, we either know or think probably designed almost all of them for them. But this is one that was just kind of, we always saw it there. It just kind of never really stood out. It was dark. And so as we started digging into it and renovating it for Lillis McKibben, Bongiovanni, John's not here, is he? No. They moved in, and this was really aggressive schedule. I mean, this one happened like in a blink of an eye, which sometimes doesn't happen, but they had to be out of their place, and we had to get them in here. So That's what it looks like now. Through masonry restoration, window work, painting, paint colors, lighting. If they're an office, this was an office building, so we do facade lighting like we do here on the campus. We don't light apartments because people don't want light shining in their bedrooms. But so this is one that was interesting. This is before, but and after, dealing with accessibility, updating, bringing things up to code, accessible restrooms, trying to minimize, we didn't want to put a ramp, so we manipulate the landscape a little bit so we still have accessibility, but parking and mechanicals and all that stuff. Some interesting things up in the garage, which I think Randy Shapiro said he had never been up there. We found old garage doors. We found some old shutters that came off the house. And so we used the shutters in particular to put the old ones back up because some of them were curved because of the bay window. Luckily, the curved ones were up in the garage. But we had copies made for all the other windows because all the hooks were still there. This was a before of the inside. Again, it was this, they took good care of it. And they did modifications to turn it from it had been an office before, but they used it as a law office. And then this is it after. So some of these you'll see don't look that drastic because the architecture's still there, but they do get cleaned up. And I mean, everything gets touched. This building was completely rewired, replumbed, new heating, cooling. But this in particular is the living room that was across the front of the house, like most houses. And they needed office space, so they put walls up and made one big room into three. And this, I think, Tom, you bought this just to open up the living room. I mean, that was just like the main, we got to get this room back. So what we did is we still needed offices, but we opened it back up to one big room and just did offices with glass walls. So even though Bill Jr. and Sr. can be in here, they still get their privacy, but it still feels like one big room. Just little side rooms. This was like a study that was good, but we tuned it up a little bit. We had all the doors redone, the leaded glass. They're not in this photo, but and then this is the dining room before, and again, aesthetically, we didn't do much to it. We just preserved it. But along the top there is actually tapestry, fabric woven, and but we just cleaned it and refinished it, and new lighting and new electrical. This is the stair as it was on the left. Again, architecturally, it's all there, but it just needed a little tuning up. And then on the right is what it looks like now with new lighting, and we refinished all the floors and carpets and stuff like that. There was one original bathroom still in the house upstairs, the primary bathroom, and we kept that and just kind of freshened it up a little bit. The tub doesn't work, but it's still there for part of the history. All of these houses, I mean, the parts that nobody sees or is really interested in, the guts of there are significant efforts done with all these buildings, from every utility from the street in, putting all the power that's overhead underground, upgrading electrical service, new water lines. All the apartments have sprinkler systems in them. And then all the piping is old, so we end up digging up all the basements inside and digging up the yards. So all this stuff happens kind of behind the scenes, but this was in the lower level, and the lower level's all finished off too. And then the challenge with bringing these buildings up to what everybody expects today is most of these were all radiators, steam system, open a window for fresh air if it's too hot. And, now we want it 72 degrees, 50% humidity, and everybody controls their own office and stuff like that. So the challenge is we do forced air systems. Forced air systems need ductwork, need condensing units outside. It's just all this stuff mechanically that these buildings were never designed to accommodate. So that's the challenge of how do we do that. I don't know if you want to talk about that one.
This was an important building because it was a Jarecki building, Alexander Jarecki. The Jarecki family, it's not the Frank Jarecki that we all knew that came over from Poland, flying a Russian MiG out of Poland. They may have been related way, way back, but the Jarecki family that we knew in Erie came here about 1849, a whole family. The father, I believe, was a jeweler. They came out of Prussia, but it's now part of Poland where they came from. And I think in 1852, Henry Jarecki, one of the sons, started what became the Jarecki Manufacturing Company. It didn't become a corporation until the 1870s. But Alexander Jarecki was a son of one of the brothers that came over from Prussia, Poland, and he was the president of Jarecki Manufacturing for 40 years, from 1900 until he died in 1940. He was an MIT graduate, and it was at MIT that he met the architect Frank Mead from Cleveland, who designed this house and then designed several others on 6th Street. Alexander Jarecki we'll hear more about because he built another house down on 6th Street for his daughter, Frances Collins, upon her marriage. Alexander Jarecki's wife came from across the street. She was a McBriar, James McBriar. We know the McBriars here in Erie. They're all descended from that James McBriar, who came here from Pittsburgh in the lumber business, but wound up I guess owning a Ball Engine Company that became Erie Steam Shovel, that became Bucyrus Erie. And the McBriar house was directly across the street at the northwest corner of 6th and Myrtle, which is now the Catholic house. So that's the context of this. The Jarecki family, besides Alexander here, there were 6 other Jareckis that had houses on West 6th Street, including Alexander's daughter and his son, and then several of his brothers and cousins, I guess.
Okay, so the next property is kind of across the street. We call it the Selden House, 318 West 6th, and Selden is another kind of deep Erie family. This was built for 2 sisters that never married. They lived here together in this house. Their parents lived down the street in the 200 block, I believe, and then eventually their brother ended up building a house next door also. But architecturally, about 1880s, early 1890s, this is another one that had been through a lot over the years, apartments and fraternity house, and this was what it looked like when we got it. So it's interesting because the doors on the side, the double bay windows on the front, this is one we have no photos of. So we knew something just didn't seem right with this whole entry and this room bump sticking out, and it was a little quirky. So anyways, we kind of made up our own porch, but we started to tear stuff off. This is a historic preservation tax credit project. So we have to go through National Park Service, tell them what we're going to do. They have to approve it. We do it. We show photos to say we show what we did, what we said, and then it gets 20% federal tax credit on the dollars invested, and then it also has a Pennsylvania State Historic Preservation tax credit of 25%. So there's a couple more that we did that with too. But anyways, these are some progress photos. It kind of going together. This was 6 apartments in the house. We have it now as 4 apartments in the house, and this is a couple weeks ago, but it's to be finished this month and will be available for rent next month. But again, this was one where we knew it had issues, but it ended up having a lot more issues than we thought. This is actually built, this is part of the area where the Erie Canal came through. So prior to 1873, this was water here. This was like a parking lot for the canal. And all these roads, these several houses here were all built when the canal closed, but that area had to be filled, and they didn't fill it to engineered standards that we fill holes today. So this had some significant settlement issues, pretty significant, to the point that the back of the house is 8 inches lower than the front of the house. And it happened a long time ago because as we tore it apart, we found where other people had tried to level the floors, like old time. So it must have started settling fairly early. Bricks cracked, foundation issues. Well, we ended up, before we did anything, we need to stabilize the building. So there's about 120 steel, like toothpicks, in the ground. And this thing's sitting on basically stilts down to the shale. So you could remove all this dirt and this could still sit there. But we didn't level it because it's a brick building. Anyways, it needed a lot of work. This whole back wall we ended up having to tear down. We put a small addition on the back, but these are just some progress photos, and that's just what it looks like a couple weeks ago. And then there is a garage behind it, and that's what it looked like when we got it. And that had 2 apartments in it, one down, one up. And we've renovated it, so there's just one apartment up and part of the side, and then that apartment gets the garage. So that's kind of a nice project. This was interior when we found it. They had moved some walls around, but kind of the core interior was there. Again, it was a fraternity house for a long time, so it had seen a lot of activity. This is the front rooms that face those double bay windows. There were originally 2 living rooms, and they made it into 1 at some point. We made it back to 2. But this was as found. It was tired. A lot of these places are just tired. And some of them you're surprised people were living in. But so anyways, I don't have a lot of after because we're still finishing, but this is a common area. We've repaired the stair railing. We've redid the leaded windows and just kind of cleaned it up. This is one of the kitchens in one of the apartments. And again, all new systems and everything is that. So do you want to talk about Selden's?
As Jeff said, it was built for 2 sisters, Joanna Sill Selden and Emma Josephine Selden. They were orphaned at a fairly young age. Their father was one of the Selden brothers that came here. The Seldens were also cousins to the Griswolds, and they were all interrelated. The Seldens were instrumental with Erie City Iron Works, and of course the Griswolds with Griswold Manufacturing. But the 2 sisters lived with their maternal grandparents just up the street, the Sills, Thomas Sill. Actually, it was at 6th and Holland, where Erie Insurance has property now. And Thomas Sill was a very, very prominent citizen here, a lawyer, a congressman, very active state legislator, and an early settler. And they were also grand nieces of Judah Colt, who was the first land agent in Erie with the Pennsylvania Population Company. So these sisters were very, very well connected family-wise, and they kind of ruled the roost from what we can see. They were the well-known in society in Erie, and they kind of ran things the way they saw it. You'll note that there are 2 bay windows in the front of the house, and there were 2 fireplaces at an angle. There's a triangular fireplace in the middle of the building. We believe there was a sitting room for each one of the sisters, so they didn't have to be together every minute.
So right next door to us here, where we are right now, is the kind of the building that started it all, the Canal side Townhouses. This was a big project, and it was the first one of the efforts, so we kind of jumped in head, feet, body first on this one. But I'm going to run through these fairly quick because we got a lot more to see. But this is what they looked like when we got them. They were identical twins, 1872-ish, right after Canal 75, because this would have been, they were literally in the canal bed. Second Empire. But anyways, again, no photos, but we did everything to them, inside and out. They were both, the 2 buildings together had 20 apartments total, 10 apartments per building. And we now have 6 apartments per building, so there's 12. And that's what it looks like now. Again, we touched everything on them, and they really, turned out pretty spectacular. Slate roofs, everything. This was the front doors. Two of the units, these were originally 4 townhouses, 4 homes, like two duplexes. So they were a 3-story house, a 3-story house, 3-story house. So it started life as 4 units. And these were the 2 front doors to 328, 330. 332, 334 doors were gone. But we restored these, and then we made exact duplicates for the other ones, using these as patterns. But all that. This was the back that you would see if you looked out here. Again, we just kind of, our first step is to peel away a lot of stuff that's been layered on these places. So that's the back of them now, where we put decks for common usage. The other thing too was egress, fire egress, stairs, all that type of stuff. So we don't want fire escapes on the outside of buildings, like you'll see. So we ended up inserting new stair towers inside these corners of the buildings and stuff. But the roof work, the detail. The other thing is again, these modern heating cooling systems need equipment, and a lot of these places you don't want to see it. So in this case, we had an opportunity where we actually added part of a 3rd floor here, and all of this stuff's up on the roof. But an interior stair exists before on the left and on the right. Some of it was just cleaning it up, cosmetically, finishes. This was a living room that got cleaned up. To get to 20 apartments in here, they had to take the bigger rooms and make multiple rooms out of them. So this was that living room where they put a bathroom and a kitchen in the back, kind of chopped it up. And, we took that all out and made them rooms again. Typical kitchen in these places. These are the new kitchens. Sometimes ceilings are dropped. We raise them back up. Bathroom, old and new, a little bit better. Basements are always interesting. This is the one basement on 328, which is in the deepest part of where the canal was. This has like a 14-foot ceiling in it. It's the tallest basement I've ever been in. But that's what, where we started, and now these are kind of our standard basement treatments in all the new systems. And again, challenges, a lot of these have solid brick walls. You don't want to see wiring. You don't want to see conduit. So we have to come in and start chiseling out the brick and bury the conduit in the walls. And just the miles of pipe and tubing and drain pipes, and where do you, everything on the 3rd floor has to get to the basement and out to the street somehow. So these are just the logistics that are challenging, and then, that's what it looks like now. I don't know if you want to.
Jeff, did you have settling issues with these?
No, these are absolutely solid as a rock, but I think that's because they went down and built onto the solid base of the canal. That's why the basements are so deep.
These buildings were built by a professional contractor, John Kuhns, who was a German immigrant. He built the Soldiers and Sailors Home, among other things. He was active in the community. He was a Democratic member of City Council and Erie School Board. But he built these as rental units. He bought the property from Mrs. Morrison of the Wood Morrison House. Her name was Missouri. Morrison, or Bliss was her maiden name, Missouri Bliss Morrison. She bought the property right after the canal closed in 1871. She bought it from William L. Scott, who owned the canal rights, and then sold it immediately to Kuhns to put up these 2 duplexes. Norm, you might be interested to know, when I was a kid living across the street, in the first one, 328, lived the parents of Henry McDonald, of the McDonald, Illy, Jones, and Britton law firm.
Married to Jarecki, one of the Jarecki girls from 6th and Cherry.
Yeah.
Mary McDonald was Jarecki.
Yeah, that's right, yep, yep.
I just throw this in here because it's by definition historic because it's 1946. It's more than 50 years old. But we picked up this Baldwin duplex, and because it's right across the street from the campus here, and just gave it a little tune-up. So I'm going to run through this quick, but that's what it looked like before. This is what it looks like now. I mean, there's a bunch of these around the neighborhood in the town, but a duplex, just rental housing that we've cleaned up. That was what it was. I mean, you can look in every single one and they're identical. We opened it up to be a little more modern. You know, they had living room, dining room, kitchen, and little rooms, and then we just opened them up and put new kitchens, but really just cleaned this up pretty good. So,
Everybody's favorite thing.
so this is historic because it's 1970, so it's 52 years old. But anyways, you know, your former office, prior to that, AAA. But I guess we have control of it now, and we're not sure what we're going to do with it yet. So I burst the bubble on that one, other than my office is in there now. So my Kidder Architects, Jeffries Engineering, and Kidder Jeffries Construction, that's our kind of home base temporarily right now, which is kind of nice because I can walk to everything because we're right in the middle. But we're looking at multiple options for the property. We've actually acquired some backyards behind the property from Fifth Street to kind of square off the property a little bit and give us some more room. And really right now it's more of like headquarters for now. And but prior to that, the Reed Mansion right there. So that's why we call it Reed Building. We don't call it United Way Building anymore, but we call it the Reed Building because on that property was the Reed Mansion, and that Charles Reed was the son of Charles Manning Reed, where the Erie Club is, and this was the son's house. And then the house in the corner was a Germer house from Black and Germer Stoves. So the one on the right was torn down for the 4 Baldwin duplexes. And then AAA actually had their offices in Reed Mansion and tore it down. And there's another photo of it. And that's up at the Peak and Peak Lodge. The rooms, historic rooms in the lodge are from this house. So, you know, they tore it down and built that. So I don't really have any more news on that other than it's serving a purpose at the point, and we're going to have a plan here in place fairly soon. Immediately next to it, Emmett House, again, was another house. Do you want to talk about history first, Tom? About Emmett House? Do you want to do history and then I can talk about the building? That might be better.
This is an interesting house. It was built by John Galbraith, son of Judge Galbraith, and he was a prominent lawyer in Erie. It was built in 1890 as a Queen Anne, and not too long after that, in the early 1900s, Charles Schenck bought it, and he was longtime president of the Henry Schenck Company, which was one of the premier building firms headquartered in Erie. They built buildings in Pittsburgh. They built the old library building on Perry Square. They built the Renaissance Center, that was then the Erie Trust Company building, the Edison Fountain in East Park, and a number of other buildings. And the Schencks lived there for a number of years, up until 1929. And in 1929, HLR Emmett came to Erie to manage the General Electric Company. And he and his wife, once they bought the Queen Anne, promptly renovated and rebuilt or built this colonial revival house in front of the Queen Anne, and totally remodeled everything. HLR Emmett ran GE for 21 years, including during World War II when they hit their peak of 16,000 employees. So it has a storied past, but it's a transformation from one style of architecture to another.
So where we're at on this one right now is we're finishing construction documents on it, and we're going to hopefully start construction here in 2 months or so. And it had been cut up into apartments, and there was, I'll show you an addition on the back, but with the addition on the back in the house, there was about 14 apartments in this property, and we're going back to 6, 2 per floor. But anyways, so that's this. The other thing you don't see a lot of, I mean, a lot of these buildings had overgrown trees and shrubs and stuff, and we kind of go in immediately. The minute we buy a building, we photograph it for the record to have a document of starting point, and then we do some professional through the process, and then we do it at the end, so we have a good documentation. But anyways, so this is what it looks like now. We've cleaned the brick already, pointed it, started to peel away stuff, and but fire escapes were added on, additions were added on. We're continuing to peel that. We pulled all the aluminum off so we understand what's left and what condition stuff's in. This was a block addition put on the back for 8 apartments right after World War II. We initially were going to try to keep it, but we decided to tear it down and make it go away so that we can just focus on the house. It wasn't worth putting any money into. So that one's in design phase. These are just some existing condition interior. Again, they took big rooms and added bathrooms and kitchens and stuff inside them. But a lot of the spaces, you know, have a lot of integrity to it. But we just have to figure out what to keep and what needs to go away. This is up on the 3rd floor. So again, this is one where we're cutting brand new stair up through the house to make it legal. And the basements are always full of pipes and wires and asbestos. So that one, you'll see a lot of activity there in all through the summer. Next to it is Scheidenhelm House. This was single family. It had been law offices. It's now Elderton is in there now. And do you want to say anything about this one, Tom? Or?
Well,
But this is what it looked like when we bought it. This was in pretty good shape, so it was a little tune-up. And we do have one older photo of it out of an architectural magazine in 1910, I think, 1911. And then that's what it looks like now.
1917, yeah. Alden and Harlow from Pittsburgh designed it. They also designed the old library building and Luther Memorial Church on 10th Street. Jim McDonald, the law firm, was in there. He took great care of the building. We didn't have to do very much to it at all. It was built by Albert Scheidenhelm, a name I never heard of, but he was associated with William L. Scott and operated the Pittsburgh and Erie Coal Company for William L. Scott. And his wife was from a prominent family in Northeast. He was from, I think, Illinois, moved in here, but his wife from Northeast.
So this is one where it was not accessible, so we had to make it accessible, put a restroom in, some minor stuff. Part of what goes with all these properties are site improvements, parking lots, storm drainage, landscaping, curbing, walks, all that type of stuff too. So we actually, was a Baldwin duplex here on Walnut that we purchased. Well, it came with the house, and we took that down so that we could add adequate parking for all 3 of those buildings. This is the last significant one, and I'm probably running out of time, but I'm going to run through this one. But right next door to it is Addison Leach House on the corner directly across from Community Foundation. Again, was this 1868, Second Empire, was a home. It was what we think converted into apartments right after World War II, like a lot of these. But this is what it looked like when we got it. First thing we knew is we wanted to expose the brick, so we paint stripped. Everything's done with chemicals and paint strippers, no sandblasting, nothing harsh. But so this is the process of stripping it because it's a messy part, and that's what it looks like now, completed. Again, this one was 100% new. It had a slate roof. It was gone. We put a slate roof back on, copper gutters, redid all the architectural detail. This was a tax credit project. So part of the tax credit, if you have original windows, they want you to keep them. So most of these are original windows. Where they were missing, we replicated what they were. And then this is just the back, what it was before and during and then now. And this was 6 apartments. It's now 5, 2 and 2 and 1. The third floor is 1 apartment. Again, we had egress, the front porch before. Now we made new doors that we felt were more appropriate. And then a back porch that was falling down, so we rebuilt that. So the upper part's all original. Some of the condition of the outside was typical, and it's all completely redone, all new. The dormers, again, is all done. And then this is one original interior photo of the house. This would have been one of the parlors. So they were much fancier then than we live aesthetically, but we know where this was. But this was completely gone, 100% gone, because when they converted it into apartments, this is one we actually went into and thought it was in good shape, and then we started opening the walls and we were like, it needed a lot more work than we thought. But this was the front. The stair was gone. And then we put a new stair in that kind of, again, fit in better. And this went all the way to the 3rd floor, so that's the main front stair. It had a steeper than 45-degree rear stair. We tore all that out, put a new stair in the back. And this was kind of just the general interior. This is a great house because it has 2 bay windows and then a bay window on each side. So we wanted to make those usable, so meaning some of them were chopped up. So this is a living room, 1 apartments. This is one where you can see part of a bay on the right and a wall, and on the other side of that wall are the other 2 windows of the bay. So we made a plan that respected those rooms, and now that's a bedroom with the full bay. These were kitchens. Again, you're kind of seeing similarities. These are the new kitchens. Old bathrooms, new bathrooms. And this is up in the 3rd floor. You're up in the mansard roof, so you're up in the dormers and the slope, before and after. We had an opportunity to completely spray foam insulate this whole attic, because a friend of mine used to live here 25, 30 years ago, and he said it was the hottest place he'd ever been in the whole world in the summer. So it's all insulated now, but again, kitchens and baths and all that stuff. And then again, the basements before, the basements now. This is actually one where we lowered 2/3 of the basement 3 feet. So we basically underpinned the foundation and lowered the floor 3 feet because the ceilings weren't high enough to put all the stuff in that we needed. So this is all the new systems.
Just a quick note about Addison Leach, somebody nobody ever heard of around here. He came from Leechburg, Pennsylvania. He was a graduate of Allegheny College. His father was one of the early organizers of Allegheny College. He was a lieutenant colonel in the Civil War. But he came here to operate the family anchor transportation lines. Specifically, the grain elevators were owned by Anchor. And during the course of that, he owned thousands of acres in North Dakota and was on the Constitutional Convention to give North Dakota statehood in 1889. He died right around the turn of the century, 1899, but his family continued to own the house for 72 years, up until about 1942, and it was then that it became apartments, as many of the houses on the street, and it's been apartments ever since.
Okay. Oops. So just to finish up here, next 502, Connell Payne Wilson House. This is waiting to be renovated. Actually, we're going to move our offices in there, but we seem to get pushed down the list, so I don't know what that means. But this is a great shingle style. There's only really 2, 3 shingle style houses, 1890-ish, 1889, 1890. We don't know the architect, but I'm thinking it might be Green and Wick out of Buffalo, who did Watson Curtsy, who did Women's Club, Taylor House, several houses along here. But great shingle style. It was a house up until 79, then it was advertising firm in the 80s, and then it was group home at Braxis, and then it was a sorority house. But it had never been cut up into apartments, so it's actually, and this is the one old photo we have of it, which pretty much looks the same. But the inside is all pretty much there. It's just, again, tired, so we'll go through and touch everything. You want to talk about Payne? I know he's...
It was built in 1890 for a man by the name of Frank Connell, again, an import into Erie. He came to Erie in the 1880s to be Secretary-Treasurer of the Skinner Engine Company and Vice President of Union Iron Works. But he became a fairly prominent citizen. In fact, he was president of the Erie Club when it moved into its present headquarters in the Reed Mansion. And he, soon after, he wasn't there real long, up until the early 1900s. And it was, the next one was Payne. That was in 1920s. The Payne family bought it. His name was Frank Payne, and he was the manager of Metric Metal Works, which was also part of American Meter. And the Paynes are interesting because his father, Calvin Payne, was an associate of John D. Rockefeller down on the oil fields around Oil City and Pit Hole and those places. And his father is considered, from something I read in an old publication of the oil and gas industry, his father was considered one of the giants in the oil and gas business. In fact, he put in all of the gas and oil lines, pipelines for John D. Rockefeller early in the Rockefeller Standard Oil empire. The Paynes continued to own it. In fact, Calvin Payne, the father, died there. Another claim to fame of the two Paynes, Calvin the father and the son, were that they manufactured the only automobile that was manufactured in Erie, the Payne Modern, at Modern Tool Works down at 4th and State. It lasted only 1 year, and there's no car available for anybody to see, but it's documented, well documented. The last industrialist, really, to own it as a single-family house was right after World War II. Norman D. Wilson, the son of Norman W. Wilson, bought it, but 2 years after he bought it, he was killed in a train accident, and his widow then sold the house to his parents, Norman W. Wilson, who was the longtime officer at Hammermill Paper Company. He started as an office boy, a dropout from Erie High School at 16, was a protege of Ernst Behrend, and worked at Hammermill for 62 years, and retired as chairman emeritus. So those three industrial families had the house up until, what year was it? 79, yes, 79. And then, as Jeff said, it became an advertising agency, a home for troubled youth, and a sorority house. And you can imagine what all of those things did to the inside.
So we're getting close here. As we get further away from downtown, the buildings are in a little bit better shape, and we've just been acquiring them, and if they're occupied, we just keep the tenants, and then at some point we'll not renew their leases and do a renovation. But Otto Germer House, 538, kind of Georgian revival, about 1890s.
95.
Yeah, 95, but, you know, nice house, in good shape. The previous owners really took care of it, so, but we're just doing some common area tune-up. This is the foyer inside, and a wall was put up that blocked off a back window, so this wall here was added. So we're just doing some tuning up. We painted outside and stuff like that, but opened up and creating a new arch. So that's kind of just some fine-tuning work, but we'll go through it eventually in a year or two. Do you want to talk about Germer? Sorry.
we out time? No, we're probably over time. If you don't mind, indulge us. It was built for Otto Germer Jr., the son of the man of Black and Germer Stoves, and then became Germer Stoves. He was an interesting guy. He played professional football for the Cleveland Athletic Club, and in a game with the University of Michigan at Ann Arbor, he was described as the human eel because he could wiggle his way through the line. He died rather young. Don't know anything about his wife and family. And then it was owned by Benjamin J. Walker. A lot of us here knew B.J. Walker from American Sterilizer, but this was B.J. Walker's grandfather. Lived there, and grandmother lived there until sometime more recently, and then it became apartment houses.
So this has 5 apartments in it, and we'll keep it that way. Across the street, 555 West 6th, we call Walker Filer House. This house and the Tudor next to it, to the right on corner of 6th and Cherry, were built at the same time, about 1910. These were designed by Frank Mead, the architect from Cleveland that's done other houses. So these are, it's still a big house, but it's modest compared to some of the other houses. And again, this was a single family. It was featured in a magazine, Architects Magazine, back in the teens, and that's a picture of it. So, you know, it hasn't changed much, but it was converted into 4 apartments at some point. And we're gonna keep it apartments, but we're gonna go through the whole thing and give it a tune-up. But it's a nice Tudor style house, which we have a lot of Tudors.
Just a comment about it. It was built for Edward Walker, who was the father of B.J. Walker. No, he was the son of B.J. Walker, and he was president of Erie Malleable Iron. And then in the 1930s, it was acquired by Enoch Filer and his wife. Enoch Filer was a very prominent lawyer in Erie, as the lawyers in the audience will know. He was a chancellor of the bar, but he was on the boards of he was chairman of the board of Erie Malleable and chairman of Marine Bank and a member of the boards of Zurn, Erie Brewing, Erie Window Glass, and Irvite Corporation. He was a very, very active lawyer and prominent citizen. And he was also one of the 3 original trustees of the Erie Endowment, which in 1935, which became the Erie Community Foundation. Oh, okay. Don't know a lot about this. This is one of the oldest buildings on 6th Street. It goes back to 1855, the basic part of it. It was part house, and then it had a kind of a wing put on it, and it was a barber shop for a long period of time.
Why don't you wait, because I got your...
Okay.
So we have this, it's rented to apartments. We're just gonna keep it occupied for another year or 2, and then we'll go through it. So then the last one that we're gonna talk about is Jarecki Collins' house.
Well, this was built by Alexander Jarecki for his daughter Frances after she married Adrian Collins, who was an Australian who came here in 1913. Adrian Collins was probably the only non-Jarecki that was involved in the management of the Jarecki Manufacturing Company. It was built in 1927 by Constable Brothers of Erie, and was designed by Frank Mead again from Cleveland. It's a wonderful house. There only have been 2 owners before us. The Collins family was in there for 40 years, and the Pish family that maybe some of you knew here lived there for another, I think, 37 years. So we're only the 3rd owner of it. It's a single-family house, and it's a classic Tudor Revival-style English manor house.
So this has been an interesting project. We have all the blueprints for the house, original blueprints, original specification book, letters, documentation, all kinds of stuff. That's been interesting to just kind of know all that detail, but it's going to remain a single-family home. We're going through it top to bottom. You saw that. You remember last summer, it was basically either had a hole in front of it or a pile of dirt or both. Yeah. But we weren't ready to do the work in the house, but we knew our weather around here, so we tried to get all the underground, water, sewer, gas, electric, storm, all that done, and that took the summer to do that. But the masonry's been cleaned, trim's been painted, repaired. All the windows are out. 80% of the windows are steel windows with leaded glass. Those were all removed, and they're taken down to Pittsburgh Stained Glass Studio, and they're redoing them all, and we'll get them back. But this is the back of the house. But you can just see the detail, the front door, the leaded windows. We have 3 major chimneys that needed a lot of work, and but the intent is to preserve it and update it in a sensitive manner. So, and another garage. We like garages. If we don't have a garage, we build one. So we built some garages too behind some of the other properties. But
When that's done, you'll rent that?
What's that?
You'll rent that out when it's done? Is that what?
This garage?
No, the whole house.
Oh no, it'll be privately used. It's the clubhouse. I don't know.
Keeping it for our own use.
Yeah.
It won't be open for tours or things like that, or might?
Well, maybe at some point it will be, if there's a tour on West Sixth Street, we could arrange something.
And has a great yard in back for garden parties, so it'll get used. So just winding up here, but as you can tell, Tom has really spent a lot of time understanding the history of these buildings. With Carl Anderson has helped him to do research, but to make sure that information is always available to anybody, every building either has or will have a plaque like this, and with the basic history of the building, so anybody from here on out can walk up to the front door and read about the history of the building, and then that's it. So I did want to acknowledge that my architect firm has been able to work with Tom on this. Jeffries Engineering and our construction company has been able to be directly or manage all the work to date so far. So we're very grateful to be involved with these projects, and I think all of us, our team, we have a team of people. We meet every Tuesday, go through everything, are having fun, we're having a good time. So thank you very much.
I know we're running late, but does anybody have any questions? I mean, this is a unique opportunity. Norm?
Yes, you know the architects for many of the houses. You have the plans that the architects drew for many of the houses.
Just the last one,
Wow.
the Jarecki Collins, none of them, nobody had anything.
It turns out that Adrian Collins really was kind of the superintendent of the building on it, because there's correspondence from him to the various contractors. And he really, I think we have to thank him for preserving all of the blueprints and the construction documents.
Mm.
Just a little comment on Norman Wilson. I saw him at Jail Cox once, and he had a regular raincoat on. Inside of the raincoat was pink, because he didn't want to look ostentatious. He needed the warmth.
Right, he wanted to be warm.
It was a pink-lined raincoat.
That's a question. Jeff, some of those ones that you haven't done yet, they had a lot of white painted wood interior, like the wood had been painted white. Do you guys usually strip that off and take it back to the bare wood, or just?
A lot of it, if it's already painted, a lot of it was always painted.
Oh, okay.
We only really find if it's oak or mahogany, but a lot of it has, if it was ever painted, a lot of it is still not painted, so we keep that.
One exception is in the Addison Leach house. had a lot of walnut trim. We kept the original doors on the first floor walnut. In fact, we stripped those so that they would be walnut doors. And there's a balustrade. Obviously the railing and the newel posts we restore.
And if some of the wood is in primary kind of public spaces and it has a lot of paint, even if it was painted, we're still stripping it to get back because a lot of details lost. So back porch has been busy. We've been keeping back porch busy stripping woodwork.
Well, it's a gift to Erie, what you're doing.
Yes,
Beautiful.
absolutely. What a treat. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I also want to thank our Board of Corporators. Your support of our community through United Way is changing the future of our children and families throughout the city and the county. And with your help, the cycle of poverty that has persisted for far too long in our community is going to be broken. With you, we envision the Erie region as a collaborative community of opportunity where all students succeed and all families thrive. So now the Corporators are invited to do self-guided tours of the campus. Docents will be stationed throughout the current exhibits to answer questions. And the current exhibits are included in 3 galleries: the Watson Curtsy Mansion, the Admiral Thomas Weschler Military Gallery, and the new exhibit building featuring 20th century architect Frank Lloyd Wright. So thank you, and thank you again for Tom and Jeff. Just what you're doing is just phenomenal. Thank you. And enjoy the rest of your day.